Anthology series are surprisingly rare in anime, and even when they do come out, they tend to not get a whole lot of fanfare. They may become cult classics for a small section of the wider community, but by and large, they don't really take off and become super popular or prominent, which is probably part of the reason why we don't see too many of them. If the ones that come out don't do super well, what incentive is there for companies to invest in new ones? That very well may start to change, however, after the release of the recent Tatsuki Fujimoto 17-26 anthology, which fittingly is called that because he wrote the stories for these 8 episodes during those years of his life. These were all effectively one-shot mangas that just have this one story and never went beyond that, which is what you would expect for an anthology series. A whole bunch of disconnected stories that have nothing to do with each other, but potentially are unified by a similar theme or tone. In this case, there is a good amount of variety amongst these 8 episodes, but tonally, there is a lot that unites them. Many of these stories have some element of absurdity to their premise, some sort of ridiculous element that is placed into an otherwise normal world, and for the most part, despite that, taken pretty seriously. That isn't to say there aren't episodes here that are almost entirely comedic. I would say the confession one is the most comedic of all of them, the one that doesn't really try to take itself too seriously, but there are plenty here that have just one element of silliness that despite that is taken seriously. I think of the final story about the 2 sisters. The whole premise of that episode is dumb. It's something that would never happen in real life. But by using that otherwise ridiculous premise as a vehicle to tell a genuine story about these 2 sisters whose relationship has been strained and how this otherwise ridiculous incident can help them to heal their bond is a very creative and interesting way to handle that type of story. It does mean that with a lot of these episodes, you just kind of have to roll with whatever the absurd aspect of the premise is. But if you can handle that, you will ultimately get a lot more out of these episodes than if that element of absurdity ends up really bothering you. And I could see people going either way on it, but that's kind of what you would expect from an anthology series in general. You're almost certainly not going to like, or at the very least not like to the same extent, all 8 of these episodes. You're going to have favorites, you're going to have ones you don't particularly care for. For me personally, I really like the mermaid story, which ironically is probably the one with the least absurdity in it. Like, obviously it has this supernatural premise, but it does stand out compared to the other ones in that it's not a normal world with something obviously silly in it. Like, yes, it's a world with a difference in that mermaids exist, but it feels the most serious of all of them. But it does stand out a bit in that it doesn't have that, oh, here's a completely normal world with just something kind of ridiculous going on. Like, oh, there's a disease where you can just randomly turn into a girl one day. Oh, this guy can just stop a bullet because why not? It's not handled in that way like the other episodes are. But for the most part, these stories do follow that trajectory. Let's take an otherwise normal setting and have something strange happen, but still play it straight. Take it seriously. See how that element can be utilized to explore characters or explore some other element of the plot. So while these stories are not necessarily unified in what they focus on or the types of themes they're exploring, they are, for the most part, unified in their tone and how they like to be structured. And notably, you can see a lot of elements here in these 8 stories that Fujimoto would later employ with things like Chainsaw Man. Because Chainsaw Man, just on the surface, is a bit silly. Like, oh, there's this guy with chainsaws growing out of him. That's kind of dumb. That's a little bit absurd. But it's utilized in a otherwise very serious story. Now, there are differences because Chainsaw Man is not a otherwise normal world. It's not like, here's everyday life and now this guy is sprouting chainsaws. That would be more in line with this anthology. Instead, of course, it's a world that revolves around these devils and these supernatural abilities. So it's not exactly the same, but you can see the similar elements there. You can see how Fujimoto would have grown from the kind of person who would make these anthology stories into someone who would eventually make Chainsaw Man. The through line is there. The elements of similarity are there, and the growth in how he's writing and handling his stories and his worlds and utilizing a lot of similar story elements is very visible here. So if you're somebody who is just a fan of Fujimoto and his works, obviously something like this is something you're definitely going to watch because it was made by him and literally has his name on it. But just as a piece of intriguing media to show how this creator has grown over time, seeing his early one-shots and comparing them to the stuff he has made since then is very interesting. It's a nice study piece, you could say. that won't be something that appeals to everybody, but if you're into that sort of thing and trying to understand how a creative starts off and then grows and develops over time, this will be a very intriguing piece of media to you. And for everyone else, even if you don't like all 8 of these episodes or don't like them all to the same degree, you will probably find something to like in them. The production value is high. They're also not very difficult to watch. I mean, the longest one of these is like 22 or 23 minutes, so a normal episode length, but a lot of them are less than that. 18 minutes, 16 minutes. I think the shortest is only 13 minutes, so it's not very difficult to get this done. I watched it in one sitting myself, so this isn't something that's a massive time commitment to consume. And since you have 8 different stories here, 8 different worlds to explore, I don't think you'll get bored even if you don't like one of them. You'll know that, okay, if I'm not jiving with this story, the next one will be completely different. So as an exploration of Fujimoto's trajectory and development as a creative, I think this is very interesting, whether or not you are a super big fan of his later works like Chainsaw Man or not, but also just as an example of an anime anthology, something that we really do not get all that often, that actually has a lot of popularity going into it simply because it has Fujimoto's name on it. I think that this is worth exploring in the hopes that its success could lead towards other anime anthology series coming out in the future. Because it is very strange when you think about it that we really don't have many examples of prominent anime anthology series. They certainly exist, and if you know where to look, you will find them, but there really should be more. And I think there is a creative void that is just begging to be explored with regards to the types of interesting one-shot stories that you can make in the form of an anime anthology. This is a medium that really could benefit from exploring that type of format, significantly more so than it currently has. So I would hope that the success of this anthology series encourages more anime studios to try and either adapt more anthologies or create their own in the future. And even if it doesn't, this anthology is still certainly worth your time. It's not a massive time commitment. And at the very least, even if some of these stories don't jive with you, I think at least a few of them will pique your interest. So give it a watch, and hopefully more anime anthologies in a similar vein will be made going forward. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and until next time, take care everyone. Look forward to the next video.